Hello, long time no see. Hello. Today I want to document or maybe do a little tutorial of a project I want to do. There's this really cool jacket that Hayley Williams wears in her Still Into You video, and I really want to recreate it. It's a jacket by Unif. It does not exist anymore, and if you try to buy it off someone, it is extremely overpriced. I'm gonna walk you guys through how to recreate. I'm gonna like put it here. So my plan is I bought just this light blue Zara jacket, and I did some research into paint on what you can paint on leather. So what you're gonna need is obviously a jacket. Do not get a black jacket. I would get either a white or like the same light blue that I got, or just like any light color, just like a pastel, so that it's easier to paint the colors on, so they show up more vibrantly. The paint brand I'm using today is called Angelus? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Angelus Paint? I've heard, or I've read a lot of good reviews. Like when you look up leather paint, like this is the brand that shows up. So I bought, I hope I have enough. I bought 3 things of white, one in which I'm actually going to be using to mix with a pink that I got. So hot pink, gonna mix with white, pale blue, lilac, pale yellow. I also got 2 acrylic finishers by them. They also recommend getting their deglazer before you start painting. So basically what that is if you look at leather jackets, they kind of have that shiny finish on them, and that's what helps the jacket from cracking. With the deglazer, what that does is it actually removes that acrylic layer, so that when you paint on it, the paint can actually like kind of get more into like the crevices and like actually stick on better. Unfortunately, because I live in Canada, they were not able to ship the deglazer to me because it's highly flammable. But I looked into it, and their deglazer is actually some sort of acetone, so I just bought acetone. I hope this works. I have to say though, with the acetone, you're going to want to do it in a really well ventilated area. The reason why you want to do it in a really ventilated area is because, for one, you don't want to breathe this stuff in, and 2, it needs to be able to evaporate. Pure acetone eats away plastic, so if you are using a faux leather jacket and it just stays on there, it will destroy the jacket. So just make sure you're really careful when you're doing the deglazer, or you're using the acetone, because you don't want to destroy your jacket. I'm going to be doing this in my garage, and basically I'm probably going to use a sponge and just like do a very light layer everywhere, just wiping it down with the acetone to remove that acrylic layer that's on top. You will also need painter's tape, because you want to be very precise, because we're doing like color blocking. I have never seen anyone paint an entire jacket using like Angelus paint or like leather paint in general, so I have no idea if this will even work, but I'm gonna try it anyway. I'm very excited. Yeah. Oh, I also want to say I'm gonna be using an airbrush gun, airbrush machine, an airbrush. I'm using an airbrush. By no means do you need to use an airbrush to do this. You can just use a normal paintbrush. There are 2 reasons why I'm using an airbrush. 1 is because I just happen to own one, and 2, I am paranoid that I'm not going to be able to do even layers with the paintbrush. I don't trust myself to do that. Whenever I paint, I kind of just like put way too much on, so the airbrush will guarantee a very even layer. But again, you do not need an airbrush. You can use a regular paintbrush. Yeah, but if you own an airbrush, you could do that too. Might look better. I don't know. Yeah, let's get started. So obviously the first thing you're going to want to do is wipe down the entire jacket with the acetone, getting every inch of the jacket. I will say you probably shouldn't use a sponge, because the acetone actually started to melt the sponge, and I was getting like sponge particles stuck on my fingers, so maybe use a cotton ball instead when you're wiping it down. Don't use a sponge, especially if it's a plastic sponge. Also, don't forget to wipe down the belt too. And yeah. The next thing I did was tape off all of the hardware, because obviously you don't really want to paint like your zippers and things like that. I mean, it's up to you, but I taped it off because I wanted to keep them metallic and shiny, because that's how the original unif jacket looks. Taping around the zippers was kind of tricky, so it just requires a lot of patience. Take your time with it. It obviously doesn't need to be perfect. Once you're finished taping off all your hardware, we can move right into painting. So basically what you're going to want to do is do 2 coats of just the white paint, just because you want to have a nice base to work on. You need a blank canvas, similar to like when you're dyeing hair. It's just so the colors show up more vibrantly. So again, that's 2 coats of white. In between each coat, you're going to want to use a heat gun, or if you don't own a heat gun, a hair dryer. Heat setting the paint is a very important step, so make sure that if you're using a hair dryer, that the hair dryer can actually get hot enough to do the setting. I think Angelus Paint recommends 400 degrees Fahrenheit to actually set the paint. Luckily, my hair dryer does get pretty hot. If I just put my hand over it, it will burn my hand, so yeah, just remember, heat set between coats, very important. So when I was doing the white layers, I was still kind of getting used to using the airbrush on the jacket. So just in this next clip here, I'm going to show you what happens if you put too much paint on the jacket. This is why it's really important to do just really thin layers and then heat set between coats. You don't want the jacket to get this chunky, flaky texture, because obviously that doesn't look good. Just really take your time with it and have patience. So this is what the jacket looks like with the white coat. I'm now going to move on to adding the pink coat. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to be diluting the pink with white. I kind of eyeballed it until I found a color that I liked, and I just made a lot of it so that I wouldn't run out and have to remember the formula. And then I taped off the section that I'm going to be doing pink. And again, you're going to want to do 2 coats of color. Make sure that you are heat setting between coats. Don't be afraid to be generous with the painter's tape. You want to make sure that you're not painting on the white as much as you can. So it is the next day. I had painted for like 6 hours yesterday. I started at 3, stopped at 9. It literally took me 6 hours just to do the white base on the jacket and just the pink. This project is not for people who are impatient. You definitely should not rush yourself. I'll show you what the jacket looks like with the pink. So I did make a couple mistakes, but I'm just gonna cover that up with more white. I think I'm gonna do blue next. So let's do that.
The pale blue wasn't quite pale enough for me, so I added more white to it just to make it a little bit more pastel. And here I was getting a little bit more creative with how I could block off the rest of the jacket when I was painting it. You probably won't need to be as careful if you're just using a paintbrush, but because I'm using an airbrush, the paint does tend to fly everywhere, so I just wanted to be extra careful so I don't have to correct too many mistakes at the end. So here's the jacket with the pink and blue coat. I'm now going to move on to yellow. Here's the jacket now with yellow. I will say that before I paint on every white panel, I double check to see if there's any mistakes that need to be covered up again with more white. Always just take your time with it and be patient. And by the way, we are now onto our final color, purple. After I finished all of my colors, I went over the entire jacket with the acrylic finisher. Just one coat is fine, you don't want to put too much. I don't want to show myself doing it because obviously I want the final result to be a surprise. So this next clip here will be the finished result.
So this is obviously the finished result. I am very happy with it. I do want to say one thing. Actually, I want to say two things. First of all, the hairdryer, if you're using faux leather, might shrink the jacket. This used to fit me very well, and now, uh-oh. Yeah, it's a little tight. I'm gonna have to like do a lot of these to re-stretch it out. Also, I would say if you're gonna do faux leather, probably size up. The second thing, obviously the original unif jacket is a bit more pastel than this. I don't know if it's showing up on camera. I'm like looking in the viewfinder right now and it looks actually close to the original, I would say, but IRL these colors are a little bit more pigmented, I would say. Also with the original unif jacket, this panel is actually blue, but I changed it to yellow because I wanted more of a contrast. I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know what to say. That's the end of the video. It's just that's the end now.